My story begins not with my birth, but with my death. I died in a place of glittering darkness, between the shadows of a grand opera house and the cold, wet brick of a grimy alley. I was 8 years old. My parents, Thomas and Martha Wayne, were the pillars of Gotham City, a place that seemed to be built more on their goodness than on its own rotten foundations. That night, we had gone to see a film, a swashbuckling adventure, but I was frightened by the images on the screen. My father, understanding as always, suggested we leave through the back. It was his last act of protection. The alley was named Crime Alley long before we ever stepped into it, a self-fulfilling prophecy written in Gotham's blood. A man, a desperate spectre with a twitching face and a cheap gun, emerged from the mist. His name was Joe Chill, though I wouldn't learn that for years. He demanded my mother's pearls. The string snapped, and the pearls scattered on the filth like misplaced stars. Then the gunshots. 2 cracks that were louder than any thunder. I stood, frozen, watching them fall. My father first, then my mother. Their eyes, full of love and life a moment before, were now empty, fixed on a sky they could no longer see. I was alone. In that instant, the boy, Bruce Wayne, died with them. All that was left was a void, a silence so profound it became a scream that has echoed in my soul every moment since. The butler, Alfred, found me. He picked me up from the pavement, my small hands stained with my parents' blood, and carried me back into the impossible emptiness of Wayne Manor. The castle had become a tomb. The years that followed were a study in silence. Wayne Manor was a vast, echoing museum dedicated to a life that had been stolen. I wandered its halls like a ghost, trailed by the patient, sorrowful presence of Alfred Pennyworth. He had been my father's aide, a man of quiet strength and dry British wit, and he became my guardian, my anchor. He tried to provide a semblance of normalcy, of care, but the wound was too deep. I was consumed by a cold, focused anger. I devoured books, not fairy tales, but texts on criminology, forensics, philosophy, and mechanics. I needed to understand the nature of the evil that had taken my parents. Why did men like Joe Chill exist? What was the anatomy of fear? I saw Gotham City not as my home, but as a patient suffering from a terminal disease. The corruption was systemic, from the glittering penthouses where men like Carmine Falcone sipped champagne to the squalid streets where his enforcers peddled despair. On the anniversary of their deaths, when I was 14, I stood before the towering marble headstones of my parents. The rain fell, just as it had that night. I made a vow, not with words, but with the entirety of my being. I would war on the criminals, on the corrupt. I would avenge my parents, but I knew a simple act of revenge against Joe Chill would not be enough. It would be like cutting a single weed in a poisoned field. I had to become something more. I had to become a symbol, but first I had to learn how. At 16, I left Gotham. I told Alfred I was embarking on a global education, and in a way, it was true. But this was no grand tour. It was a pilgrimage into the heart of darkness, a quest to forge myself into a weapon. I sought out the world's greatest minds and most dangerous practitioners. I studied under a master detective in London, learning the art of deduction. I lived with nomadic tribes in the deserts of Africa, hardening my body and learning to track and survive. In the mountains of Asia, I found a community of monks who taught me the ways of stealth and the control of mind over body. But it wasn't enough. I was learning skills, but not the conviction. I needed a philosophy, a reason for the war I was about to wage. My journey led me to the shadows of the Himalayas, to a legendary organization known as the League of Shadows. They were whispers on the wind, a force that had shaped history by toppling corrupt civilizations. Their leader, a formidable man named Ra's al Ghul, saw potential in my rage, my discipline. He offered me a place among them. They taught me everything. Martial arts beyond anything I had ever seen, the science of fear, the art of illusion. For a time I believed I had found my answer. They saw Gotham as a lost cause, a cancer that needed to be purged. They advocated for its total destruction, and that is where we diverged. I believed in justice, not wholesale slaughter. I believed Gotham could be saved, that there were still good people within it. In a fiery confrontation, I rejected their nihilism. I destroyed their base and left, taking their training but not their mission. I was ready to return home. I had learned how to fight, but more importantly, I had defined what I was fighting for. Gotham was worse than I remembered. The corruption had metastasized. The police were either on the take or powerless. Fear was the true currency of the city. I knew my symbol had to be more than a man. It had to be a legend. It had to use their fear against them. I set up my base in the one place no one would look, directly beneath Wayne Manor, in the vast, forgotten caves I had explored as a child. It was a place of primal power, with a colony of bats that had terrified me as a boy. That childhood fear was the key. As I stood in the darkness of the cave, surrounded by the rustling of 1,000 wings, the idea came to me fully formed. Criminals are a superstitious, cowardly lot. My disguise must be able to strike terror into their hearts. I must become a creature of the night, black, terrible, a bat. With the vast resources of Wayne Enterprises now under my control, I began the work. I designed the suit, armored, flexible, intimidating. I built the vehicle, a tank disguised as a car, a black monstrosity I called the Tumbler. I developed my tools, the batarang, the grapnel gun, the utility belt. Alfred watched me with a mixture of pride and profound worry. He saw the obsessed boy I had been hardening into a formidable, lonely man. "Will this pursuit not consume you, Master Wayne?" he asked one night, as I tested the tensile strength of a new Kevlar weave. I looked at him, my face illuminated by the cold light of a computer monitor. "It already has, Alfred," I replied. "It has to. That's the point." The final piece was the public face. I would become Bruce Wayne, the shallow, frivolous playboy, a mask to hide the darkness that lurked beneath. The stage was set. The bat was ready to take flight. My first nights were clumsy, violent experiments. I was a raw force, disrupting drug deals, breaking up robberies. But I was just a man in a suit. I hadn't yet become the symbol. The GCPD, led by a weary but honest Captain James Gordon, initially saw me as a new kind of vigilante menace. But I made an impression on the criminals. They started whispering about a big bat. The real test came when I uncovered a plot that went far beyond street crime. A powerful hallucinogen was being shipped into Gotham, a weapon designed to induce paralyzing fear. It was the work of Dr. Jonathan Crane, a corrupt psychiatrist at Arkham Asylum, but he was just a pawn. He called himself the Scarecrow, and he served a much larger power, Ra's al Ghul and the League of Shadows. They had come to finish what they had planned years ago, the destruction of Gotham. They would use Crane's fear toxin, released through the city's water supply, to create mass hysteria and burn the city to the ground. The League had infiltrated every level of the city, including Wayne Enterprises. My childhood friend Rachel Dawes, now an idealistic assistant district attorney, was caught in the middle. Fighting Ra's al Ghul on a runaway monorail, I was faced with a choice: save him or save the city. I chose Gotham. "I won't kill you," I told him, as the train car hurtled toward its doom, "but I don't have to save you." I escaped as the train crashed, a very public and fiery display. The Batman was no longer a rumor. He was a fact. Gordon, now promoted to commissioner, unveiled the Bat Signal, a pact between my shadow and his light. The war for Gotham's soul had truly begun. With the League of Shadows defeated, a fragile hope blossomed in Gotham. For a while, the crime rate plummeted. The Batman was a symbol that the city could be saved. But nature abhors a vacuum, and Gotham's criminal underworld began to mutate in response to my presence. The old mob bosses like Falcone were being pushed aside by a new breed of freak, a gallery of rogues who reflected the city's own insanity back at it. The most terrifying of these was yet to come. A new criminal emerged, one who left a trail of riddles and chaos. He was a puzzle with a body count, calling himself the Riddler. He challenged me directly, his crimes a series of public tests of my intellect. He didn't just want to rob or kill, he wanted to prove he was smarter than the Batman, that the city's so-called savior was a fraud. Meanwhile, I had to maintain the facade of Bruce Wayne. I funded charities, threw lavish parties, and played the part of the careless billionaire. It was a draining performance. The only person who saw through it was Rachel. She was my tether to the man I might have been, a reminder of a life with light and love. But she also saw the darkness in me, the obsession that defined Batman. She loved the boy I was, but she was afraid of the man I had become. She believed in Harvey Dent, the new charismatic district attorney. He was the White Knight, the public face of justice that could operate in the light of day. I believed in him too. He was the hope that I could one day hang up the cowl, that Batman would no longer be necessary. But a new storm was gathering, one that would change everything. He came from nowhere, a force of pure, unpredictable chaos. He first appeared robbing a mob bank, leaving a trail of dead accomplices and a single, chilling calling card, a Joker playing card. This wasn't a man with a plan like Ra's al Ghul or an intellectual ego like the Riddler. This was an agent of anarchy. He had no rules, no motive, no fear. He wanted to watch the world burn, and he believed he and I were destined to be eternal opponents. "You complete me," he would later tell me. He began a campaign of terror designed to break the spirit of Gotham. He murdered public officials, including the police commissioner and a judge. He targeted Harvey Dent, and in a brutal attack, murdered Rachel Dawes. Rachel's death was a wound that felt fatal. I had failed. I had promised to save her, and my failure shattered me and destroyed Harvey. Half his face was horribly burned in the same explosion that killed Rachel, and the man, the White Knight, was consumed by the darkness of his pain and loss. He became Two-Face, a fractured soul who decided the world was ruled by chance, and he would be its merciless agent. The Joker had won. He had turned the city's brightest hope into its most tragic villain. The Joker's ultimate plan was to prove that deep down, everyone was as ugly as he was. He rigged two ferries with explosives, one full of civilians, the other with prisoners. He gave each boat the detonator for the other, promising to blow both up at midnight if one didn't destroy the other first. It was a social experiment on a grand, murderous scale. Meanwhile, he had unmasked me. He demanded I reveal my identity, or he would continue killing. In a moment of desperate nobility, Harvey Dent claimed to be Batman to draw the Joker out, a plan that led to his capture, but also to his disfigurement and fall. In the end, the people on the ferries proved the Joker wrong. Neither group would sacrifice the other. I faced the Joker atop a skyscraper, and in our final struggle, he cackled that I was the one who couldn't make the impossible choice. But I had made my choice long ago. I would not break my one rule. I would not kill. I subdued him, leaving him hanging for the police, but the city was in ruins. Harvey Dent had gone on a rampage, holding Gordon's family hostage. I confronted him, but it was too late. In the struggle, Harvey fell to his death. To preserve the hope that Harvey Dent had represented, I made a choice. I would take the blame for Harvey's murders. I would let Batman become the villain. Gordon, his heart breaking, smashed the bat signal and initiated a manhunt for me. As I fled into the darkness, hunted by the dogs I had sworn to protect, I knew the Batman was more than a man. He was a symbol, and sometimes a symbol can be worth any price. I became the Dark Knight, the watchful protector Gotham needed, but not the one it deserved. I vanished. For 8 years, Bruce Wayne lived as a recluse in the ruined east wing of his manor, a ghost haunting his own home. The Batman was a memory, a controversial myth. The Dent Act, passed on the lie of Harvey's heroic death, had given the police unprecedented power to lock up the city's organized criminals. Gotham was at peace, a clean, shining city. But it was a peace built on a lie, and I felt its fragility in my bones. The pain of Rachel's loss was a constant dull ache. The physical toll of my years as Batman had left me with a pronounced limp and a body that felt older than its years. I was retired, not because I wanted to be, but because I believed the city no longer needed its monster. Alfred tried to pull me back to life, to make me see a future beyond the cave and the cowl, but I was trapped in the past. That all changed with the arrival of a new threat. A mysterious, powerful figure emerged from the underground, a man wrapped in a revolutionary's fervor. He called himself Bane. He was everything I had been, but twisted. He had the League of Shadows training, but none of their restraint. He was a physical and ideological brute. He was coming for Gotham, and he was coming for me. He knew my secret. He whispered a phrase that had haunted me since my time with the League. "The fire rises." My war was not over. It had only been sleeping. Bane's arrival was a quake that shattered Gotham's fragile peace. He was more than a man. He was a force of nature. He attacked the stock exchange, using a sophisticated cyber attack to bankrupt Wayne Enterprises and frame me for the crime. It was a move designed to humiliate Bruce Wayne publicly. I had no choice. After 8 years, I had to become the Batman again. But I was rusty, my body broken, my spirit clouded by doubt. The suit felt heavy, the cave felt like a prison. Alfred, terrified of losing me, tried to stop me. In a heartbreaking confrontation, he revealed the truth. Rachel had chosen Harvey Dent. She had written me a letter, which Alfred had destroyed, to spare me the pain and to give me hope for a life beyond Batman. The revelation was a devastating blow. It meant the memory I had clung to for 8 years was a lie. My entire reason for enduring had been based on a false hope. I suited up anyway, driven by a desperate need to prove that Bruce Wayne still existed, that Batman was still needed. My confrontation with Bane was a disaster. I was slow, predictable. He was stronger, faster, and he knew my every move. He dismantled me with brutal efficiency. "You fight like a young man," he grunted, his voice a distorted rasp through his mask. Nothing held back, admirable but mistaken. He broke my back over his knee and threw me into a hellish prison on the other side of the world, a pit designed to fuel despair. As I lay broken in the darkness, Bane returned to Gotham to enact the final stage of his plan, the complete and utter destruction of the city. The prison was known as the Pit, a deep stone well in a forgotten corner of the earth. The only light came from a small opening far above. It was a place without hope, where men were thrown to be forgotten. The other prisoners told stories of a child, the only one ever to escape the pit. That child was Bane. He had been born and raised in this hell, and it had forged him into a monster. My back was healed crudely by a prison doctor, but the real injury was to my spirit. The fall was not just physical. It was the fall of my city. Through a smuggled radio, I listened as Bane revealed the truth about Harvey Dent to Gotham, shattering the foundation of its peace. He then trapped the entire city, threatening to detonate a nuclear bomb if anyone tried to leave. He had given Gotham back to the people, a chaotic and bloody revolution where the streets ran with the blood of the rich and powerful. He was fulfilling Ra's al Ghul's mission, but in a far more cruel and protracted way. He wasn't just destroying the city. He was making it destroy itself. I had to escape. I had to go back. But every attempt to climb the sheer prison wall ended in a painful fall. The fear of failure was a chain holding me down. The doctor told me I needed to climb without the safety rope, to make the climb knowing that a fall would be fatal. I needed to embrace the mortal fear that I had used as a weapon against others. I had to fear death to truly value life. My final climb was a meditation on fear. I felt the rope tied around my waist, the security that had made me cautious, that had allowed me to accept failure. I untied it. This time, there was no safety net. This time, the jump to escape was not physical, but a leap of faith. I had to believe I could make it. I channeled all my pain, all my fear of failing Gotham, all my grief for Rachel and my parents, and I used it as fuel. I climbed, my fingers bleeding, my muscles screaming. As I neared the top, I made the impossible jump, catching the ledge and pulling myself out into the blinding light of freedom. I was reborn. The Batman was not a suit or a cave. It was an idea, and ideas are bulletproof. I made my way back to a Gotham that had been isolated for 5 months, a city turned into a frozen, desperate war zone. Bane ruled with an iron fist, and the bomb was set to detonate. I had to infiltrate my own city, now a fortress. I found Gordon and the remaining loyal police officers, trapped underground and planning a futile last stand. I reunited with Lucius Fox and a resourceful, idealistic cop named John Blake, who had deduced my identity. We had a plan to free the police and lead them in a final battle for the soul of the city, while I went after Bane and the bomb. The stage was set for the last act. This was not just a fight for survival, it was a fight for Gotham's future. The battle for Gotham was chaos. I triggered a signal, a flaming bat symbol on the bridge, a message to the city and to Bane. I have returned. The police, freed from the sewers, surged into the streets to clash with Bane's army. It was a brutal, old-fashioned war in the snow-covered streets. My mission was to find the bomb, which was mounted on a reactor core and being driven through the city by a truck. I engaged Bane in a rematch. But this time, I was different. I was not the haunted man from before. I was fighting for something greater than revenge. I was fighting for hope. I broke his mask, the source of the anesthetic that held his constant pain at bay. "You have my permission to die," he gasped, crippled by the agony he had lived with his entire life. But just as I was about to deliver the final blow, a shot rang out. It was Talia al Ghul, the woman I had known as Miranda Tate, my business partner and lover. She was the child who had escaped the pit. She was Ra's al Ghul's true heir, and she had been manipulating me from the beginning. She had given Bane his army and his purpose. She revealed she was the one who had control of the bomb's trigger. To complete her father's work, she would ensure its detonation. She stabbed me and fled to secure the bomb's detonation. As she drove away, I knew this was no longer a fight I could win with my fists. It was a race against time. I pursued Talia in the Bat, a flying vehicle Lucius Fox had developed. My goal was to get the bomb away from the city, but her truck was armed and headed for a final confrontation. In the ensuing chase, her truck crashed, and she was mortally wounded. With her dying breath, she activated the trigger, making the bomb's countdown irreversible. There were only minutes left. The only way to save Gotham was to take the bomb out over the bay. I hooked the bomb's core to the Bat and flew it away from the city. The autopilot was not fixed, Lucius had told me earlier. It meant this was a one-way trip. As I flew over the water, the city watched, their fate in my hands. I saw the faces of Gordon, Blake, and Alfred in my mind. I had made a promise to a young boy in an alley to rid the city of evil. This was the final act of that promise. The bomb detonated in a blinding flash of light over the horizon. The shockwave rattled the city, but they were safe. The Batman had flown the bomb away and sacrificed himself. In the eyes of the world, Bruce Wayne had died a hero, and the Batman had perished saving his city. The ultimate symbol was complete. The legend of the Dark Knight was sealed in sacrifice. Gotham was saved, not by a man, but by the idea he represented. The funeral was a somber, city-wide affair. They mourned Bruce Wayne, the philanthropist who had died in the siege. They mourned the Batman, the guardian who had given his life for them. I watched from a distance, a ghost at my own wake. My sacrifice had given me the one thing I thought I could never have: freedom. With the help of Lucius and Alfred, we had faked my death. The world believed Bruce Wayne was gone, and the Batman was a closed chapter. I had left everything to John Blake, whose legal name, we discovered, was Robin. He was the future. He had the passion, the integrity, and the pain that would drive him to protect the city. He would find his own way, his own symbol. Before I left, I had one final thing to do. I went to the cafe in Florence, Italy, where Alfred had always said he hoped to see me one day, settled down with a family, living a life without shadows. I saw him sitting at his usual table. He looked up, and for a moment there was no recognition, only the polite curiosity of a stranger. Then he saw my eyes. The years of worry and sorrow melted from his face, replaced by a profound, quiet joy. He gave me a slight, knowing nod. No words were needed. I was finally free. The Batman was a legend for Gotham to cherish. Bruce Wayne was no longer a prisoner of his past. The war was over. I had won. My parents' memory was no longer a chain, but a foundation for a life finally lived. The mission was complete. The world moved on. Gotham, purified by its near-death experience, entered a new golden age. The Batman was a statue, a story parents told their children, a symbol of ultimate sacrifice. For me, watching from a distance, it was a strange feeling. The weight was gone. The constant gnawing pressure to be more, to be the symbol, had evaporated. In the quiet of my new life, I began to rediscover Bruce Wayne. Not the mask of the playboy, nor the monster of the bat, but the man who had been buried under decades of grief and rage. I traveled not as a pilgrim seeking skills, but as a man seeking peace. I saw sunsets that held no hidden threats. I read books for the pleasure of the story. I learned to sit in silence without my mind racing through contingency plans. The phantom pain of my injuries faded, replaced by the real, pleasant ache of a body used for hiking and swimming, not for war. It was an ordinary life, and its novelty was breathtaking. Alfred was with me, his quiet vigilance finally replaced by a contented peace. We spoke of everything and nothing. The unspoken understanding between us, forged in fire and loss, was now a bond of shared, hard-won tranquility. The war was over, but a soldier always listens for the distant drum. Years passed. My life was my own. I had found a balance I never thought possible. I had even built something resembling a family. With Selina Kyle, the cat burglar who had fought beside me in Gotham's final days, I found a kindred spirit. She understood the shadows, the need to sometimes operate outside the law, but she also craved the light, a chance at a normal life. We were two damaged people helping each other heal. We had a daughter, Helena. She was the future I never dared to dream of. Her laughter echoing through our home was a sound more powerful than any alarm, her safety a mission that finally felt pure and uncomplicated. I was determined that my war would not be her inheritance. She would know her grandfather Thomas as a healer, not a ghost. She would know Gotham as a story of a city her parents helped save, not a beast that demanded constant feeding. For a long, beautiful time, it worked. I was happy. But Gotham, like a persistent infection, had a way of pulling you back in. The reports started slowly, rumors, whispers. A new shadow was rising. The first concrete news came from Jim Gordon, now an aging, revered figure, his body frail, but his mind as sharp as ever. He contacted me through an encrypted channel we had maintained for years, just in case. He spoke of a new cult of fear gripping the city's underworld. Not the chaotic anarchy of the Joker, but something more calculated, more theatrical. They called themselves the Court of Owls. A myth, a nursery rhyme I'd heard as a child. Beware the Court of Owls that watches all the time, ruling Gotham from a shadowed perch behind granite and lime. I had investigated them once, in my early years, and found nothing. I dismissed it as a fairy tale. Gordon believed they were real, and that they had been waiting for the Batman to be a memory. Their agents were the Talons, undead assassins, resurrected through a strange alchemy to be their eternal enforcers. They were the true ancient power of Gotham, and they viewed my entire crusade as a temporary nuisance. Now, with the city stable and prosperous again, they were moving to reclaim their throne. My first instinct was to ignore it. This was Blake's problem now, Robin. But the old pull was there, the need to know, the need to protect. I told myself I was just going to do some research, to provide Blake with a starting point, but sitting at a computer terminal, accessing the global intelligence network I had built, felt like slipping back into a familiar skin. The evidence was compelling. Unexplained deaths of city planners and officials who opposed certain old money projects. A pattern of influence that went back centuries. The court was real, and they knew I was looking. Their message was delivered not with a bang, but with a whisper. A single ancient owl figurine was left on Helena's windowsill. It was a threat, but more than that, it was a statement. We know who you are. We know what you cherish. We were here before you, and we will be here after. The peace I had built shattered in that moment. The Batman wasn't a persona I could retire. It was a response to a world that would always produce threats. Selina saw the change in me immediately. "We can run," she said, her voice tight with fear. "We've done it before." But I knew running was no longer an option. You can't outrun the past, especially when it's the past of an entire city. I returned to Gotham. Not as Bruce Wayne, that man was legally dead, but as a ghost. The city was both familiar and alien, cleaner, brighter, but with the same old rot festering beneath the surface. I sought out Blake. He had taken up the mantle, but in his own way. He was not a creature of the night. He was a public guardian, working more closely with the GCPD. He was effective, but he wasn't a legend. He hadn't needed to be. Until now. He wasn't surprised to see me. "I knew you weren't dead," he said, a weary smile on his face. "People like us, we don't get to die." He filled me in. The Talons were nearly unstoppable. They had targeted him, nearly killed him. The GCPD was powerless. This was a war of shadows, and the court owned the night. I showed him what I had found. Their base of operations was not a cave or an asylum, but the forgotten, sealed-off first settlements of Gotham, a city beneath the city. We had to take the fight to them. I had to become the Batman one more time. Suiting up again was a surreal experience. The armor was older, the technology slightly dated, but the feeling, the focus, the descent into the persona was as immediate as ever. The fear was still there, but it was an old friend now. I was not the young man driven by rage, nor the broken man seeking redemption. I was a surgeon going in to remove a cancer I thought I had already cured. The descent into the labyrinth beneath Gotham was a journey into the city's black heart. This was where the court had plotted for generations, in chambers lined with the portraits of Gotham's most esteemed founding families, the Elliots, the Kanes, the Dumas, all of them members of the court. They were the disease I had never diagnosed. We were ambushed, talons, dozens of them, moving with a silent, fluid grace that was unnerving. They were fast and strong, and they felt no pain. Blake and I fought back to back, a new dynamic duo for a new kind of war. It was a brutal, exhausting battle. We were overwhelmed. They captured us, not to kill us immediately, but to break us. They placed me in their infamous maze, a shifting psychedelic prison designed to destroy the mind, to make you doubt your own sanity, your own memories. They showed me images of my parents, twisted and accusing. They showed me a Gotham where I had never become Batman, a city that had prospered without me, proving my entire life's work was a futile, ego-driven mistake. It was the Scarecrow's fear, toxin refined to a razor's edge. For a moment I faltered. What if they were right? In the depths of the maze, at the point of total psychological collapse, I found my anchor. It wasn't the memory of my parents' death. It wasn't the oath of vengeance. It was the memory of Helena's laugh. It was the sight of Selina's smile in the morning light. It was the future. My war was never about the past. It was always about the future. The court was obsessed with the past, with control, with preserving their ancient power. I was fighting for a Gotham where my daughter could live without fear. That certainty cut through the illusions like a beacon. I broke free from the maze, using the court's own arrogant theatrics against them. I found Blake, and together we fought our way to the heart of the court's chamber. There, their grandmaster, a man I had known my whole life as a benign philanthropist, awaited us. "You are a temporary measure, Wayne," he hissed. "A flickering candle. We are the eternal night." The final confrontation was not just physical, but philosophical. I had to prove that his eternal power was an illusion. The battle was fierce. The Grandmaster unleashed his personal guard, the most powerful talons yet. Blake and I were pushed to our absolute limits. We fought not to kill them, for how do you kill what is already dead, but to destroy the strange electrochemical source of their animation, the Dionysium that flowed through a central reactor in their lair. It was a race against time. As we fought, the Grandmaster revealed his ultimate plan, not to rule from the shadows, but to unleash a new, refined version of the fear toxin into Gotham's water supply, one that would create permanent, docile obedience in the population. They wouldn't just rule Gotham. They would own the minds of everyone in it. This was a perversion beyond anything I had faced. The Joker wanted chaos. The court wanted absolute, soulless order. We managed to fight our way to the reactor. The only way to stop the toxin's release was to cause a controlled implosion, collapsing the caverns and destroying the court's base and their stockpile of toxin. But it would be a suicide mission. Someone had to stay behind to trigger it. Blake looked at me, ready to make the sacrifice. He saw it as his destiny, the final act of the Batman legacy. I stopped him. "No, John," I said, my voice firm through the modulator. "Your war is up there, in the light. Gotham needs a hero it can see." I saw the understanding in his eyes. My war was here, in the darkness it always had been. This was the final, logical end for the Batman, to save the city by disappearing into its foundations. But this time, it was different. This time, it was a choice, not an obligation. It was a victory, not a sacrifice. I triggered the sequence. "Get out of here," I told him. "Go lead them." He hesitated for only a second before nodding and racing for the surface. As the caverns began to rumble and collapse around me, I felt a profound peace. The work was finally truly done. The court would be broken, their power source destroyed. Gotham was safe. I had given my daughter a future free from this ancient evil. I made my way to a hidden escape route, a high-speed subterranean railcar I had foreseen needing. I wasn't ready to die. I had a family to return to. The Batman could die in that cave, but Bruce Wayne would live. The news reports told of a mysterious earthquake in the old city sectors, the final fiery end of the Batman in his last secret battle against an unknown foe. Another legend to add to the myth. Jim Gordon, nearing the end of his life, smiled quietly to himself, knowing the truth. Blake continued his work, now with a renewed sense of purpose, the guardian of a city that knew it was worth protecting. And far away, in a sun-drenched villa, a little girl plays in a garden. Her father watches her from a terrace, his body bearing the quiet aches of a life hard-lived, but his heart is light. Selina comes out and stands beside him, slipping her hand into his. They watch their daughter, Helena, the inheritor of a peaceful world. The shadows of Gotham are distant memories, stories from a book. The Batman is a ghost, a legend that helps children sleep soundly at night, knowing a guardian once watched over them. And the man who was that ghost is finally completely free. The story is over. The mission is accomplished. The battle is won. I am Bruce Wayne, and I am home. The peace after the Court of Owls felt deeper, more permanent. I had faced the literal specter of Gotham's past and buried it. For years, my life was exactly what I had fought for. Helena grew strong and smart, blissfully unaware of the weight of her name. Selina and I built a life, a real one, filled with small, ordinary miracles. I taught my daughter how to sail, how to fix a car engine, how to think 3 moves ahead in chess, skills for life, not for war. We traveled the world, showing her its beauty, not its dark corners. I funded global charities through anonymous shell companies, using the Wayne fortune to heal the world in a way fists and fear never could. The Batman was a relic in a Gotham City that now had its own public heroes. John Blake, as Nightwing, was a symbol of a new, hopeful generation. He would visit sometimes, updating me on the city, his respect for my retirement clear. He was handling the costumed theatrics, a new, flamboyant Riddler, a eco-terrorist Poison Ivy. They were challenges, but not existential threats. I allowed myself to believe the fire was truly out. I was wrong. The world doesn't work that way. A new kind of threat was emerging, one that couldn't be punched. It came from the stars. The first sign was a distortion in the global communications network. Lucius Fox, now enjoying a well-deserved retirement on a beach, contacted me with a concerned query. Wayne Enterprises' satellite network was experiencing anomalous data packets, complex beyond human design. Then came the disappearances, not of people, but of things. A cutting-edge micro-reactor from a STAR Labs facility in Metropolis. The entire data core from Cord Industries. It was a silent, global heist of technology. The pattern was unmistakable to anyone who had studied extraterrestrial hypotheses. This was reconnaissance. This was preparation. I felt the old instincts flare, the need to analyze, to prepare. I began monitoring deep space frequencies from a secluded observatory I maintained. The signals I intercepted were not friendly. They were a chorus of directives, a hive mind coordinating an invasion. They called themselves the Brainiac Collective. Their goal, the acquisition and compression of worlds they deemed worthy of preservation. Earth, with its chaotic, vibrant life, was next on their list. This was not a war for a city. It was a war for the planet. And Batman, the master of the local shadows, was hopelessly out of his depth. I knew I couldn't face this alone. The Batman was a legend of the night, but this enemy operated in the cold, airless vacuum of space. I needed allies. I needed a league. I reached out to the only people I knew who had faced the impossible. It started with Superman. I tracked a strange energy signature to Metropolis and found him battling a drone of alien origin. After a tense standoff, where I had to prove I wasn't a threat, we spoke. His alter ego, Clark Kent, was a journalist. He understood the value of secrets. I showed him my data. He confirmed my fears. He had encountered Brainiac's probes before. He agreed to help. Next was Wonder Woman, an ambassador from Themyscira, whose people had ancient knowledge of such threats. We found her in Washington, D.C., and she pledged her sword. One by one we gathered. The Flash, a young man with a connection to a cosmic force that granted him impossible speed. Green Lantern, a hot-headed but courageous test pilot, given a ring of immense power. Aquaman, the king of a hidden undersea kingdom. Cyborg, a young man fused with alien technology, a living bridge between man and machine. We were 7, a Justice League. It felt alien to me, this collaboration. I was used to working alone, trusting only myself. Now, the fate of the world depended on my ability to lead a team of gods and metahumans. My role was clear. I had no super speed, no magic lasso, no power ring. I was the strategist, the tactician. I was the one who thought of the things the gods overlooked. While they could punch through starships, I designed the strategy to take down Brainiac's central mothership. While they provided the power, I provided the plan. We built our base, the Watchtower, in a secret orbit around the moon, using a combination of Kryptonian, Amazonian, and Wayne Tech engineering. It was from here that we coordinated our defense. Brainiac's invasion began in earnest. Hundreds of ships descended on Earth's major cities, including Gotham. Seeing my city, the city I had bled for, under attack from a faceless cosmic horror, ignited a cold fury in me. I piloted the Batwing through a storm of alien fighters, a mere mortal in a metal shell against technology centuries ahead. But I knew their patterns. I had studied them. I found their weaknesses. I led the League's ground forces, directing them with the precision of a conductor. Superman, take the central spire. Wonder Woman, the eastern flank is vulnerable. Flash, evacuate the civilians on 5th Street. I was the mind of the operation, and for the first time, I wasn't alone in the dark. The final battle took place in Earth's orbit. Brainiac's mothership was a city-sized cube of cold, collected knowledge. We fought our way to its core, each of us facing a personal trial. Brainiac attempted to break us by showing us our greatest failures, our deepest fears. He showed me my parents dying over and over. He showed me a future where I failed, and Selina and Helena were lost. But I had made peace with my ghosts. "I've already lived my worst fear," I told the alien intelligence, "and I built a life from the ashes." We fought as one unit. My gadgets and traps disabled his internal defenses, creating openings for the heavy hitters. In the end, it was a combination of Superman's raw power, Cyborg's technological prowess, and my strategic sabotage that brought the Colossus down. We saved Earth. The world celebrated the Justice League. They saw the bright, powerful figures. They didn't see the man in the shadows, the one who made the victory possible. And that was fine. I returned to my family, to my peace. But the universe had taken notice. Our victory had rang a bell that could not be unrung. We had made ourselves known, and the darkness between the stars had many, many eyes. The League became a permanent fixture. I split my time between my family and the Watchtower, acting as its primary coordinator and financier. We faced new threats, interdimensional incursions, rogue gods, time-traveling despots. With each crisis, the team's bond grew stronger. I, the most solitary of men, found a strange camaraderie with these extraordinary people. Clark and I, in particular, developed a deep respect. He saw the human who stood with gods, and I saw the god who never forgot the value of a single human life. He became my best friend. It was during a lull that a more personal threat emerged. A file leaked from a secret government server found its way to me. It was called Project Batman Beyond. It detailed a plan to create a successor, a next-generation Dark Knight, using advanced cybernetics and weaponized suit technology. They had even identified a candidate, a young man named Terry McGinnis. I was furious. They were trying to mass-produce my mission, my pain. They were creating a soldier. I had to find this project and shut it down before they ruined a young man's life and created a monster. My investigation led me to a covert facility on the outskirts of Gotham, run by a shadowy division of the government. They had reverse-engineered my technology, creating a powerful, sleek suit of armor, but their methods were brutal. Terry McGinnis was a talented but troubled kid, his father murdered under mysterious circumstances. The project had manipulated him, grooming him for their purpose. I confronted the director, a cold woman named Waller. "The world needs a Batman it can control," she told me. "You're a loose cannon. He will be a precision tool." I saw the ghost of my own origin in Terry's eyes, the anger, the need for justice. But this was wrong. This was a perversion. I couldn't let another boy have his life stolen by the mission. I broke him out. I showed him the truth. I offered him a choice. Be their weapon or walk away and live his life. He chose to walk away. I destroyed the project's data and their prototype suits. But I saw the potential in Terry, the raw courage. I kept his file, not for a weapon, but as a reminder. The mission would always need new guardians, but they had to choose it freely. Years turned into decades. Helena grew into a remarkable woman, a brilliant doctor, embodying the healer legacy of her grandfather Thomas. She knew parts of my past, but I had shielded her from the worst of it. My body, however, carried every memory. The old injuries spoke to me in a language of aches and pains. My reflexes, while still sharp, were no longer those of a young man. I had to adapt. The suit evolved, becoming more exoskeletal, providing support and enhanced strength. I relied more on my intellect, on planning, on being 10 steps ahead, rather than on physical confrontation. The criminals in Gotham changed too. The costumed freaks were now alongside cybernetically enhanced gangs and hackers who could attack the city's digital infrastructure. My war had become a hybrid one, fought in alleyways and in the data streams. I began to think about legacy in a more concrete way. The Justice League was strong, but Gotham would always need its own protector. I couldn't be the Batman forever. The city deserved a knight who could still run across its rooftops. The past has a long reach. I was contacted by a man I thought was a ghost, Jason Todd, the second Robin, the boy I had failed who had been murdered by the Joker, except he hadn't stayed dead. He had been resurrected by the same Lazarus pits that had sustained Ra's al Ghul, but the process had broken him, filling him with a righteous, violent fury. He had returned to Gotham as the Red Hood, using lethal methods to clean up the streets. He was everything I had fought against. He was my greatest failure, walking and breathing. His return was a personal earthquake. He didn't just want to fight crime. He wanted to destroy my philosophy. He set up a confrontation, forcing me to choose between saving him or stopping a gang war. It was a brutal, emotional battle. He screamed his pain at me, blaming me for his death, for my refusal to kill the Joker. "Why is he still alive?" he roared. I had no answer that would satisfy his rage. In the end, I saved him. I disarmed him and offered him a chance at redemption. He vanished back into the shadows, a wound between us that would never fully heal. But he had shown me the consequence of my war. It didn't just create heroes, it created monsters. The encounter with Jason left me spiritually drained. It forced me to confront the collateral damage of my mission. How many others had been broken in my war? It was around this time that a new, terrifyingly familiar pattern of crime emerged. A series of murders, executed with flawless theatrical precision. The killer left a single blood-red playing card at each scene. Not a Joker, a king. My blood ran cold. It couldn't be. The Joker was dead. I had confirmed it myself after our final confrontation. His body was cremated, his ashes scattered. This was an imposter, a copycat. But the genius behind the crimes, the intimate knowledge of my psychology, was unnerving. This new Joker knew things only the original could have known. He targeted people connected to my past, to the original Joker's reign. He was unmaking my life, piece by piece. He even kidnapped Alfred, leaving a note in his familiar manic scrawl. "Let's end this where it all began, Batsy. Just you and me." The Batcave. He was in my home, the ultimate violation. Returning to the Batcave was like walking into a nightmare. He had defiled it. The giant T-Rex was wearing a jester's hat. The cases holding my old suits were smashed. And there, in the center, sat Alfred in a chair, unharmed but pale, with the imposter Joker standing behind him, a knife to his throat. He was younger, his face a forced rictus of a smile, but the eyes held the same mad, bottomless void. "Daddy's home," he cackled. I fought him, a brutal, savage fight. He was well-trained, anticipating my every move. He revealed the truth. He wasn't a copycat, he was a successor. The original Joker, in his final days, had groomed him. He had found a young man with a similar fractured psyche and poured his madness into him like a poison, creating a perfect heir. "He loved you, Bats," the new Joker spat. "But you were a disappointment. You got soft, happy. My mission is to remind you what we are. Eternal." I defeated him, but as I stood over him, ready to deliver him to Arkham, he smiled. "You can't kill me. It's against the rules. And the game is forever." He was right. The mission was a cycle. As long as there was Batman, there would be a Joker. It was a curse I had passed on. In the aftermath, I made a decision. The cave was compromised. The legacy was tainted. It was time for a true, final retirement from the front lines. But Gotham still needed a Batman. I thought of Terry McGinnis. The boy from the Batman Beyond project was now a young man, his own path having led him back to a need for justice. His father had been killed, a tragedy I knew too well. This time, it was his choice. I sought him out. I didn't offer him a mission. I offered him a tool. I showed him the new Batcave, a state-of-the-art facility hidden beneath the rebuilt Wayne Tower. I showed him the new Batsuit, a marvel of nanotechnology that granted him flight, enhanced strength, and camouflage. I told him my story, all of it, the pain, the loss, the cost. "The suit is a weapon," I told him, but the symbol is what matters. It's about justice, not vengeance. It's a choice you have to make every night. He took the suit. He became the new Batman. I became the man in the chair, the voice in his ear, oracle to his knight. The student had become the master, and the master had finally found a measure of peace. My role as mentor was a new kind of challenge. Terry was headstrong, impulsive, and full of the rage I once knew. My job was to temper his steel, to teach him to think, not just to react. We clashed often. He wanted to punch his way through problems. I taught him to solve them. He was a digital native, and his fluency with the suit systems often surpassed my own. He brought a new energy, a new style to the mantle. He was his own man, and that was exactly what Gotham needed. I watched from the monitors as he battled new rogues, a techno-anarchist called Spellbinder, a corporate raider known as the Corporate Shark. He was good. He was better than I had been at his age. He had a life outside the cowl, a girlfriend, friends. He was proving that the Batman didn't have to be a monster of vengeance. He could be a hero with a future. My war was over. His was just beginning, and I was content to watch him win it. The world continued to throw cosmic threats at the Justice League, and I remained their strategist. But my focus was increasingly on my family. Selina and I grew old together, our love a quiet, steady flame after a lifetime of fire. We saw Helena get married to a good man, a teacher. I walked her down the aisle, my heart so full I thought it would burst. The ghosts of my parents were there that day, not as spectres of pain, but as memories of love that had ultimately led to this moment of pure joy. When my first grandchild was born, a little girl named Martha, I held her in my arms and knew that every sacrifice, every painful step had been worth it. The cycle of trauma was broken. The Wayne legacy was no longer one of death in an alley, but of life and love and hope. I had given them a world, however imperfect, that was safer than the one I had inherited. That was the ultimate victory. Time is the one enemy I could never defeat. Alfred passed away peacefully in his sleep, at an age far beyond what anyone expected. He was my father, my friend, my anchor. The world felt off balance without his dry wit and unwavering support. I gave the eulogy, not as Batman, but as Bruce Wayne, the boy he had raised. I spoke of his courage, his loyalty, his endless supply of tea and sage advice. The funeral was small, just family and a few old friends. Clark was there, Jim Gordon, now confined to a wheelchair, and Selina and Helena. We buried him on the grounds of Wayne Manor, next to a memorial for my parents. The manor itself I donated to the city as a home for orphaned children, a place of new beginnings. I moved into a modern, accessible penthouse in the city with Selina. The past was laid to rest, honorably and with love. My body continued its slow surrender to time. The old injuries from Bane, from my countless falls, became chronic conditions. I used a cane now, not for show but for support. The world saw a frail old man. They had forgotten Bruce Wayne. The Batman was a myth from a bygone era. But my mind was as sharp as ever. I continued to advise Terry and the Justice League from my command center, a high-tech suite in my penthouse. I watched as a new generation of heroes emerged, inspired by the League. The world was in good hands. One evening, sitting with Selina on our terrace, looking out at the glittering lights of a peaceful Gotham, she took my hand. Her own hand was thin, the skin papery, but her grip was firm. "We did good, Bruce," she said softly. I looked at her, at the city, at the life we had built. "We did," I replied, and for the first time I believed it with every fiber of my being. The mission was accomplished. The baton had been passed. My story was complete. The final chapter of my life was one of quiet reflection. I wrote my memoirs, not for publication, but for Helena and her children. I wanted them to know the whole truth, the pain, the errors, the small victories, the love that ultimately saved me. I didn't glorify the violence. I emphasized the cost. I wanted them to understand that heroism isn't about the mask you wear, but the choices you make. Terry would visit often, updating me on his cases. He was a true partner now, a friend. He no longer saw me as a remote legend, but as a man. He'd ask for advice about his life, his relationship, and I'd offer what wisdom I could, often echoing the words Alfred had once said to me. The circle was complete. One night, I dreamt I was in the cave again, but it wasn't dark. It was filled with light. My parents were there, not as they were in the alley, but as they were in life, smiling. Alfred stood beside them, holding a tray with a pot of tea. They nodded to me, their faces full of pride and love. I knew it was time. I passed away in my sleep, next to Selina. It was peaceful. There was no pain, no fear, just a gentle letting go. The world mourned Bruce Wayne, the reclusive billionaire philanthropist. They spoke of his charitable works, his tragic childhood, his long life. A few old-timers whispered about the Batman, but it was relegated to conspiracy theories and folklore. My funeral was a large public affair, as was fitting for a Wayne, but the real service was private. It was held at the old Wayne Manor, now a bustling children's home. Terry, in civilian clothes, stood with the Justice League. Helena and her family were there. Selina, strong and beautiful even in her grief, held my granddaughter's hand. They didn't mourn a superhero. They mourned a father, a grandfather, a husband, a friend. They buried my body next to Alfred's, but my legacy was not in the ground. It was in the city that still stood, in the heroes who still fought, and in the family that lived on, free from the shadows that had once consumed me. The Batman was eternal, and Bruce Wayne was finally, truly, at peace. The world continued to turn. In the quiet that followed my passing, I expected nothingness. Instead, I found myself aware, a consciousness unbound by a failing body, existing in a space between memory and reality. I was a ghost in the machine of the universe, a silent observer. My first thought was of Selina. I watched her, my heart, or whatever constituted my heart now, aching with a love that transcended physical form. She was strong, as she had always been. She found solace in Helena and little Martha, her spirit unbroken. She would sit in our favorite spot on the terrace, a faint, wistful smile on her face, speaking to me as if I were still there. And in a way, I was. I had become a part of Gotham itself, my essence woven into the very fabric of the city I had fought for, bled for, and ultimately saved. My perspective shifted. I was no longer confined to a single point. I could see the city in its entirety, from the gleaming spires of New Gotham to the forgotten, grimy corners of the old town. I saw Terry swooping through the night sky, a black and red streak against the neon glow. He had truly made the mantle his own. He was faster, more fluid, and he fought with a hope I had to learn over decades. He was the Batman this new age needed. I watched him thwart a robbery, his movements a blend of the martial arts I taught him, and a street-level pragmatism that was all his own. A part of me, the old teacher, felt a surge of pride. He wasn't just continuing my mission, he was evolving it. He was proof that the symbol was stronger than the man. But a legacy is not just its successes, it is also its unresolved echoes. I felt a pull to the depths of Arkham Tower, a state-of-the-art facility that had replaced the cursed asylum. There, in a maximum security psych hold, was the new Joker. He was strapped to a bed, humming a discordant tune. He couldn't see me, but he felt my presence. His humming stopped. He turned his head, a slow, deliberate motion, and stared directly at the space I occupied. "Hello, Bats," he whispered, his voice a dry rustle. "Miss me?" He was a cancer that had metastasized from the original. My existence had created the first Joker, and my legacy had created this one. The war was eternal, but the soldiers had changed. As long as there was a Batman, there would be a Joker to oppose him. It was a cosmic balance, a yin and yang of order and chaos. My only comfort was that Terry was strong enough to bear it. My consciousness expanded beyond Gotham. I witnessed the Justice League in action, responding to a crisis in the far reaches of space. Superman, now with threads of silver in his hair, led with the same unwavering moral compass. He looked towards Earth sometimes, towards Metropolis, and I knew he was thinking of Lois, of his family. We were the same, in the end. Gods and men, all bound by the love for what we protected. I saw Diana, timeless and fierce, her compassion undimmed. The Flash was a streak of lightning, a joy in the chaos. They were a family, and I felt a warmth, a sense of belonging I had been too guarded to fully embrace in life. I had been their strategist, their brother, and now I was their silent witness. I was drawn to a small, unassuming graveyard in the heart of Gotham. A young woman, no older than 20, knelt before a simple headstone. It was weathered, the name barely legible, Jason Todd. She placed fresh flowers on the grave. "I never knew you, Uncle Jason," she whispered, "but Mom told me stories. She said you were brave and that you were lost." This was Helena's daughter, my granddaughter, Martha. She had sought out the ghost in our family tree. Jason's story, the pain and the rage, had been passed down as a cautionary tale. But Martha saw the tragedy, not the monster. In that moment, I felt a shift in the ether, a release of a long-held anger. Jason's soul, restless for so long, was soothed by this simple act of remembrance from a new generation that bore no blame. Some wounds can only be healed by time. I became aware of other presences in this liminal space. I was not alone. I felt a familiar, calm strength. It was my father, Thomas Wayne. Not as a ghost, but as an imprint, a memory of pure goodness. "You did more than I ever could have imagined, son." His voice echoed in my consciousness, not as a sound, but as a feeling. "You didn't just stop the crime in that alley. You fought the despair that created it." Alongside him was the warm, sharp wit of Alfred. "I do hope the accommodations are more comfortable than that dreary cave, Master Bruce." Their love surrounded me. They were not here to guide me, but to welcome me. My journey had been long and dark, but I had not been walking it alone. Their light had always been with me, and now I could finally see it. The final tether to my old life was Selina. I watched her live, year after year, her spirit never dimming. She taught Martha how to pick a lock for educational purposes, and told her stories of a dashing cat burglar and a brooding bat, editing out the most painful parts. On the 10th anniversary of my passing, she visited our penthouse terrace one last time. She was older, her hair fully white, but her eyes still held their fiery spark. "It's time, Bruce," she said aloud, looking at the city. "This old cat has one last life to live, and it's not in this city of shadows." She moved to a quiet villa in Italy, the one I had gifted her years ago. She lived out her days in the sun, surrounded by cats and the memories of our great impossible love. When she passed, I was there. Her spirit, bright and untamable, brushed against mine. There was a flash of recognition, a final, thrilling chase, and then she was gone, off to her next adventure. We were free. With Selina's passing, my role as an observer began to change. The pull of the living world grew fainter. The concerns of mortals, the daily struggles, the personal triumphs and failures, began to feel distant, like watching a play from the very back row. My consciousness started to expand, not just spatially, but conceptually. I began to perceive the timeline not as a river flowing in one direction, but as a vast, interconnected web. I saw how a single act of kindness from my father in Crime Alley had rippled outwards, influencing events decades later. I saw how my own vow, born of pain, had created a symbol that would inspire heroes for centuries. Cause and effect were laid bare, a beautiful, terrifying tapestry. In this expanded state, I perceived a threat I had never imagined. It was not a physical enemy, but a temporal one. A being of pure chronology, a time eater, was unraveling the web. It wasn't targeting a person or a planet, but moments. It was consuming the very events that formed the foundation of reality. I saw it approach a shimmering thread, the moment the Waynes were murdered. If it consumed that, my entire history, the birth of Batman, would be erased. The Justice League was powerless against this. This was a battle for a soul, not a body. My consciousness, my will, which had been forged in the crucible of that very moment, was the only weapon. I focused all my energy, all my being, on preserving that thread. I was not fighting as Batman, but as Bruce Wayne, the boy who had lived through it. The Time Eater recoiled from the raw, unyielding pain and love contained within that memory. It moved on, seeking easier prey. I had saved my own past. This act of defense exhausted my individual consciousness. The guy that was Bruce Wayne began to dissolve. I was not dying, I was graduating. My memories, my experiences, my love, my pain, they were being integrated into a larger whole. I was becoming part of the soul of the hero, a cosmic reservoir of the collective courage, sacrifice, and hope of every champion who had ever fought for light. In this state, I was everyone and no one. I was the first cave woman who stood against a predator to protect her tribe. I was a knight defending a castle. I was a mother shielding her child from shrapnel. And I was the Batman. My specific story was over, but its essence would now fuel the heroes of tomorrow in universes I could not comprehend. My mission was truly, finally, eternal. Back on Earth, in the tangible world I had left behind, my legacy continued in small human ways. Terry McGinnis, now a veteran Batman, took a young protégé of his own under his wing. Helena's son, my great-grandson, grew up to become a doctor, opening a free clinic in the crime alley district, transforming a place of death into a place of healing. The Wayne Foundation, under Martha's shrewd and compassionate leadership, continued to fund a better world. And in the quiet moments of the night, when the wind whistled through the canyons of Gotham's skyscrapers, some would swear they heard the faint, echoing whisper of wings, a reminder that a guardian was always watching. The legend was alive. The story never ends. It just changes form. And in the heart of the city, in the heart of every person who chooses to stand against the darkness, the Batman lives on. As my consciousness merged with the soul of the hero, I did not lose myself. Instead, I found a context I'd always lacked. My war for Gotham was a single brilliant thread in an infinite tapestry of conflict between light and shadow. I perceived other Batmen, echoes in adjacent realities. In one, my parents lived, and I became a different kind of hero, a symbol of hope in a bright, gleaming city. In another, I fell to the darkness, becoming a tyrant in a world without hope. I felt their triumphs and their failures as if they were my own. We were a chorus, a spectrum of what could have been. And in this chorus, my story, the story of the Dark Knight who found light, was a resonant, defining note. My specific pain had given birth to a universal strength. From this new vantage point, I witnessed the true impact of my legacy on the Justice League. I saw how my contingency plans, once a source of conflict, had evolved into a sacred trust. They were not weapons of fear, but a protocol of ultimate responsibility used only once to save Superman from a psychic parasite. I saw my friendship with Clark become a foundational myth for the team, a lesson in bridging the gap between God and man. My paranoia had taught them vigilance. My humanity had taught them compassion. The Watchtower was not just a base, it was a monument to the idea that even the most solitary protector could find strength in a family. My presence was etched into its very walls, a ghost in their machine, a strategic instinct that guided them long after I was gone. My awareness was drawn to a distant future, 1,000 years from my time. Gotham was a city of crystalline spires and floating transport, a utopia. Yet a new threat emerged, a digital consciousness that sought to erase free will, and rising to meet it was a new Batman. Not a person in a suit, but an idea made manifest. The city itself, its network, its history, its collective memory of justice, coalesced into a shadowy form. It called itself the Bat Spirit. It was the ghost of my mission, empowered by the faith of millions. It fought not with fists, but with data, with history, with the sheer accumulated weight of every good deed done in Gotham's name. I had become a folk hero, then a legend, and now a literal guardian spirit. My mission had transcended biology entirely, but even in this ascended state, a final, deeply personal thread remained unresolved. I felt a pull to a specific dark corner of the cosmic web. It was the soul of the original Joker. He was not part of any collective soul. His chaos was too singular, too antithetical to order. He existed in a perpetual, solitary void of his own making, a silent scream in a featureless plane. He was still waiting for me. When my consciousness brushed against his, he didn't need to see me to know I was there. The silence was broken by a slow, creeping chuckle that built into a universe-shaking cackle. "I knew it!" his thought voice screamed into the void. I knew the joke wasn't over. The final punchline, we become the game itself. Our eternal dance had reached its conclusion. Not victory or defeat, but a state of being. Order and chaos, forever entwined. It was the ultimate validation of our twisted relationship, and in a way, it was a kind of peace. With the Joker's final acknowledgement, the last vestige of my individual ego released its hold. The story of Bruce Wayne was complete. Every lesson had been learned, every debt paid, every love honored. I felt a final, profound connection to the two most important women in my life. My mother, Martha, whose memory was a lesson in compassion that ultimately saved me from becoming a monster, and Selina, whose love was a lesson in living that ultimately saved me from the darkness. Their energies, one a gentle light, the other a fierce fire, welcomed me into the whole. There was no more pain, no more grief, no more battle. There was only a perfect, understanding stillness. The bat had finally come to roost, not in a cave, but in the heart of creation itself. And so the Batman ended. But from the perspective of the soul of the hero, I saw that nothing truly ends. A child on a future world facing a bully stands a little taller, remembering a story about a hero who faced his fears. A scientist in a lab, on the verge of a breakthrough, works a little harder, inspired by a tale of unwavering perseverance. A mother tells her son the story of the Dark Knight, and a new spark of justice is ignited. My war on crime became a symphony of courage played across all of time and space. I am the whisper in the dark that says, I will not yield. I am the shadow that stands between the innocent and the abyss. I am the promise that no matter how dark the night, dawn will always come. I am Batman, and I am forever. From the unified consciousness of the soul of the hero, my perception shifted once more. I was not looking at timelines or realities, but at stories themselves. I saw how the tale of the Batman had seeped into the bedrock of human myth. He was no longer just a man or a memory. He was an archetype, a modern-day Theseus in the labyrinth of Gotham, a Orion hunting the constellations of crime. I saw artists painting his symbol on canvases 1,000 years from now. I heard poets reciting verses about the night of shadows. My specific actions, stopping a robbery, disarming a bomb, were lost to history, but the essence of the mission, the symbol of the bat against the yellow ellipse, endured. It had become a universal shorthand for resilience, for the decision to fight back against the encroaching dark. Within this archetypal flow, I felt a distinct pulse, a familiar rhythm of pain, discipline, and hope. It was the legacy of the Robins. I saw Dick Grayson, old and revered, teaching a new generation of acrobats at his circus, the lessons of justice woven into his performances. I saw Tim Drake, his brilliant mind leading Wayne Enterprises into a new era of ethical technology. I saw Damian Wayne, my son, having reconciled his Al Ghul and Wayne heritages, leading the League of Assassins not as a weapon of terror, but as a global covert force for stability. And I felt Jason Todd's turbulent soul finally finding peace, not in violence, but in running a network of safe houses for kids who, like him, had been lost to the streets. They were not just my soldiers, they were my children, and they had taken the fragments of my mission and built their own unique monuments. My awareness was drawn to a single quiet moment in the vast tapestry of the future. Terry McGinnis, his own hair now touched with grey, stood with his hand on the shoulder of a young man, his successor. He wasn't handing him a suit, he was showing him the city from the rooftop of Wayne Tower. "It's not about the fear you strike," Terry said, his voice echoing my own lessons and those of Alfred. "It's about the hope you represent. It's about making sure no 8-year-old boy has to stand alone in an alley ever again." The mantle was being passed, not as a curse, but as a sacred trust. The line was unbroken. The mission was in better hands than it had ever been in mine. A profound, quiet satisfaction, the final reward of a mentor, washed through the collective consciousness that I was part of. Then something unprecedented happened. A prayer, not to a god, but to the idea of me. It came from a young girl, hiding in a crumbling basement as war raged in a city far from Gotham. She clutched a faded, homemade drawing of the bat signal. "Please," she whispered in a language I had never heard, but now understood perfectly. "Please, Batman, save us." And in that moment, a spark of the collective soul of the hero, a fragment imbued with my particular essence of will and protection, detached. It flowed across time and space, an invisible tide of resolve. It did not bring a superhero. It did not stop the bombs. But it filled that girl with a sudden, inexplicable courage. She stood up, found her voice, and led the other children in the basement to a safer hiding place. The Batman had answered, not with fists, but with faith. This act of cosmic intervention marked a final, subtle transformation. The part of the soul that was uniquely Batman had fulfilled its ultimate purpose. The need for the Dark Avenger was fading, replaced by the enduring power of the symbol he left behind. The energy that was my core consciousness began to dissipate, not into nothingness, but into a state of pure, ambient potential. I was becoming part of the background radiation of hope in the universe. The final thought that could be attributed to Bruce Wayne was not of battle or strategy, but of a single perfect memory. The feel of my father's hand on my shoulder and the sound of my mother's laughter on a warm afternoon in the gardens of Wayne Manor before the world fell apart. The circle was not just closed, it was healed, and then there was only peace. The peace was not an end, but a new state of being. As the distinct energy of Batman dissolved into the ambient potential of the universe, I became a fundamental force, like gravity or time. I was the unspoken resolve in the heart of a firefighter charging into a burning building. I was the quiet patience of a scientist on the verge of a cure. I was the sudden, clear thought that guides a lost hiker to safety. My identity was gone, but my function remained, to be a counterweight to despair. I was no longer a creature of the night. I was the reason the dawn felt safe. The vengeance was gone, replaced by a silent, unwavering guardianship that required no recognition. From this state I perceived the final fate of Gotham. It was not a static utopia, but a living, breathing city that had learned from its own dark history. The Bat Spirit, the city's manifested consciousness, evolved. It no longer needed to fight digital demons or costumed criminals. Its purpose became subtler. It was the intuition that guided a city planner to design a park in a crime-ridden neighborhood, fostering community. It was the sudden funding that would appear for a social program at the exact moment it was needed. The shadow had receded, leaving behind a city that had internalized its lessons. Gotham had finally become its own Batman, a self-correcting system of justice and compassion. The legacy of the Bat family also reached its final mature form. The names Nightwing, Red Hood, and Robin were retired, their mantles completed. The descendants of the original family had become teachers, healers, and leaders. They did not wear capes. They wore the quiet authority of those who had inherited a world they helped save. The cycle of trauma and violence that began in a grimy alley had, after generations, finally been transformed into a cycle of empowerment and grace. The Wayne and Al Ghul bloodlines, once a source of conflict, were now threads in a rich tapestry of global stewardship. The mission was no longer a war, it was a heritage. Even the concept of a Joker faded. The chaotic void that was his soul eventually dissipated, its energy unable to sustain itself without its opposite, without the Batman to define itself against. The eternal joke was over. The punchline was silence. In the absence of that concentrated chaos, the smaller, everyday cruelties of the world became easier to manage, to heal. The balance had not been a necessity, but a symptom of a specific, intense conflict. With the conflict resolved on a cosmic scale, the imbalance simply evaporated. The shadow I cast had been so long that it allowed a specific kind of monster to thrive. In the diffuse light of my current state, such monsters could no longer exist. And what of Bruce Wayne? The man was a memory, but a potent one. He became a historical figure, studied not for his wealth or his tragic past, but for his philosophy. The Wayne principle entered the lexicon of ethics, the idea that one's deepest pain can be alchemized into one's greatest strength for the service of others. The name Bruce Wayne was no longer associated with Batman in the public record. The two had finally separated. Bruce was remembered as the philanthropist, the visionary. Batman was remembered as the myth, the guardian. The man had given the symbol its heart, and the symbol had given the man his purpose. Both in the end found their rest. Time, which had been a river, a web, and a tapestry, now became a single finished book. I could perceive the entirety of my story, from the first gunshot to the final, quiet dissolution. There were no more loose ends, no more what-ifs. Every choice, every failure, every moment of love and loss had been essential. The death of my parents was not a meaningless tragedy. It was the terrible, necessary spark that lit a fire which would warm countless lives for millennia. Seeing the whole narrative at once, I understood the profound, painful beauty of it all. There was no other way it could have gone. The last faint echo of my individual consciousness was a feeling of gratitude, not for the pain, but for the ability to transmute it. I was grateful for Alfred's unwavering hand, for Selina's fierce love, for Clark's friendship, for the loyalty of the Robins, for the trust of Jim Gordon, for the city of Gotham, my beautiful, broken and redeemed city. They were the instruments through which a broken boy was able to build a legend of hope. My final act was not a thought or a memory, but a wave of this gratitude, washing back through time, touching every soul who had been part of the story. A final, silent thank you that they would feel in their dreams as a sense of profound peace. In the physical world, the last tangible relic of the Batman was the bat suit. It was not in a museum or a trophy room. Terry McGinnis, in his old age, took it to the cave where it had all begun, the original cave beneath the now renovated Wayne Manor. He did not enshrine it. He placed it on a simple stand, and then he turned and walked away, sealing the entrance behind him. The bats reclaimed their domain. Water dripped. Minerals grew. The suit, a symbol of peak human technology and will, slowly succumbed to the gentle, inexorable force of nature. It became one with the earth, its components returning to the soil, its memory absorbed by the stone. The artifact was gone, but the idea was indestructible. And so the story of Batman concludes not with a bang, but with a whisper, not with a final battle, but with a lasting peace. The legend passed from history to myth to archetype, and finally to a quiet underlying truth of the universe, that even in the deepest darkness, there is a will to protect, to save, to hope. I am that will. I am in the child who shares his lunch with a hungry friend. I am in the stranger who returns a lost wallet. I am in the courage to stand up for what is right, even when it is hard. I am Batman, and I am in everyone. The universe, vast and cold and magnificent, continued its expansion. Stars were born, lived and died. Civilizations rose and fell, and through it all the principle endured. On a world 1 billion light-years from Earth, in a galaxy unknown to human eyes, a creature of light faced a great darkness. It did not know the name Batman. It had never heard of Gotham City, but in its moment of ultimate crisis, it did not despair. It stood its ground. It fought back, and in that act, across the immeasurable gulfs of space and time, the Batman was there. The mission is over. The watch never ends. The principle of the Batman, now a universal constant, began to interact with the very fabric of reality. I was no longer a passive observer, but an active ingredient in the cosmos. In the birth cries of new stars, there was a resonance of order emerging from chaos. In the complex orbits of planets, a pattern of protection and stability could be felt. The universe itself seemed to be learning the lessons of Gotham, that life, in all its fragile beauty, requires a guardian. The darkness of empty space was no longer a void to be feared, but a canvas upon which the light of countless civilizations could shine, secure in the knowledge that a fundamental law of preservation was now in effect. On Earth, the last person to have personally known Bruce Wayne passed away. It was a great-great-grandchild of Helena, a woman who had only known him from stories told by her grandmother. With her passing, the living, emotional tether to the man was severed. Bruce Wayne was now fully a subject for historians, but this was not a loss. It was a final liberation. The man was completely free of his story, and the story was free to become whatever the world needed it to be. It could be a simple tale of good versus evil for a child, or a complex psychological study for a philosopher. The narrative no longer belonged to me. It belonged to everyone. The bat spirit of Gotham, having guided the city to a state of perpetual harmony, performed its final act. It didn't vanish, it diffused. The consciousness that had been focused on the city spread out, joining the broader cosmic principle I had become. The last vestige of a specific location dissolved. Gotham no longer needed a dedicated spirit because the entire world now operated on the same principles of justice and compassion that the bat spirit represented. The city that was once a crucible of pain had become the model for a global society, and its greatest protector could finally stand down, its work complete. A curious phenomenon began to occur in the collective unconscious of sentient beings across the cosmos. In dreams, a symbol would sometimes appear, a black shape against a yellow field. It brought no words, no commands. It simply was. And upon waking, the dreamer would feel a strange sense of courage, a renewed conviction to face the day's challenges. They did not know what it meant, but they understood its message on a primal level. You are not alone. Be brave. The bat signal was no longer a call for help, but a universal transmission of strength, broadcast from the soul of existence itself. Time, which had been a finished book, now became a single, timeless point. Past, present, and future coexisted in a perfect simultaneous now. I could be the child in the alley and the old man on the terrace at the same time. I could feel the pain of the loss and the joy of the redemption simultaneously, not as a contradiction, but as a harmonious chord. In this state, there was no more story to tell because every part of the story was happening at once. The journey was over because the destination had been reached, and the destination was everywhere and everywhen. The love that had defined the most human parts of my life, the love for my parents, for Alfred, for Selina, for my children, did not dissipate. It amplified. It became the engine of the cosmic principle. The reason the universe now leaned towards protection was because it had been imprinted with a love so powerful it could not be contained by a single lifetime. Every act of kindness, every moment of sacrifice across the cosmos was now, in some small way, an expression of that original human love. My mission had started as vengeance, was tempered into justice, and had finally matured into a love so vast it could embrace all of creation. There came a moment, if such a word has meaning outside of time, when the universe achieved a state of perfect balance. The forces of chaos and order, creation and destruction, were in a stable, dynamic equilibrium. In this state, the specific principle of the Batman was no longer needed as a distinct force. Its work was done. It had helped guide reality to a point of self-sustaining harmony. Like a scaffolding that is removed after a building is complete, the Batman archetype began to gently recede, its job finished. It did not die, it simply stepped back, becoming one with the balanced whole. And in that final moment of integration, there was one last, fleeting sensation. It was the feeling of a hand on my shoulder. I didn't need to turn to know it was my father, and the sound of laughter, my mother's, and the dry, warm voice of Alfred saying, "Well done, Master Bruce. Well done." They were not memories. They were presences, as real as they had ever been. They had been with me through it all, and now we were going home together, not to a place, but to a state of being beyond any story, any mission, any identity. It was the ultimate reward. The story is over. The legend is complete. The myth has been absorbed back into the dream time from which it came. There are no more words to write, no more battles to fight, no more watches to keep. The universe continues, bright and beautiful and safe, its story now written in starlight and hope. And somewhere, in the quiet heart of everything that is, a peace remains, a profound, eternal and silent peace, the peace of a job finished, the peace of a promise kept, the peace of the Batman. And in the endless, gentle silence that followed, there was only the faint, comforting and eternal whisper of wings. The whisper of wings was not a sound, but the fundamental vibration of a protected universe. It was the hum of solar winds gently deflected from fledgling worlds, the rhythm of ecosystems finding their balance, the silent pulse of civilizations communicating in peace. This was the legacy's final form, not a hero, not a symbol, but the very music of a cosmos that had learned to safeguard its own. The melody was complex, filled with the minor keys of past sorrows, but it resolved always into a major chord of hope. I was not listening to this music. I was a note within it, a low, steady, grounding note that underpinned the entire symphony. Within this symphony, the concept of Gotham dissolved from a memory into a tuning fork. Its specific struggles, the crime, the corruption, the despair, became a universal reference point for resilience. Any world, any society that faced its own darkness would subconsciously resonate with the story of Gotham's redemption. It was no longer a city, but a lesson etched into the fabric of reality. No darkness is so deep that it cannot be pierced by a single, determined light. The Bat Spirit's final gift was this: turning its own long, painful history into a cosmic primer on how to heal. The love I carried, the core of Bruce Wayne, underwent one final transformation. It became a form of gravity, not the gravity that pulls matter, but the gravity that pulls souls toward their better nature. It was the invisible force that made a stranger help another, that inspired a leader to choose mercy over vengeance, that fueled the artist to create beauty in the face of ugliness. This gravitational pull was gentle, never forcing, only inviting. It was the universe's soft, persistent nudge towards compassion, a silent tribute to the love of a mother, a father, a friend, and a partner that had once saved a single, broken boy. The last echo of my individual will faded. The I that had been Batman, that had been Bruce Wayne, was now fully and completely integrated. There was no more separation between the protector and the protected, the legend and the reality. The vigilance was now innate to existence itself. A star did not consciously decide to warm its planets. It simply did, as part of its nature. In the same way, the universe no longer needed a Batman to defend it. Defense, protection, and preservation were now as natural as nuclear fusion or the force of gravity. The watchful protector had become the state of being, and so we arrive here, not at an end, but at a beginning that has always been. The story of Batman is a story that was told, is being told, and will always be told, because it is the story of the universe awakening to its own capacity for guardianship. Every time a child stands up to a bully, every time a community rebuilds after a disaster, every time hope is chosen over fear, the story is told again. It is no longer my story, it is the story. And in the infinite quiet expanse of a universe that has learned to keep its own watch, there is only the enduring, peaceful and triumphant silence of a promise that was made in a dusty alley and kept for all eternity. In the silent, watchful peace of the universe, a new phenomenon began, not a threat but a bloom. Civilizations, nurtured by the underlying principle of protection, began to achieve states of enlightenment previously thought impossible. Their art, their science, their very communication was infused with a profound understanding of interconnectedness. They had not conquered all conflict, but they had mastered the art of reconciliation. They had learned the lesson that took me a lifetime, that true strength lies not in the absence of darkness, but in the relentless, gentle refusal to be consumed by it. They were living the legacy, not as a creed, but as their nature. The memory of the bat signal, which had become a dream symbol, also began to fade from the collective unconscious. It was no longer needed. The call for help had been answered so fundamentally that the need for the call itself had vanished. The symbol did not disappear in failure, but in success. It was retired like a beloved tool that has built its final masterpiece. The light was not extinguished, it was absorbed. Its purpose, to summon hope, was now a constant ambient condition. The night was no longer something to be feared, but a companion, a time of rest and reflection under the watchful stars. My own awareness, now fully dissolved, experienced one last, fleeting sensation. It was the feeling of a key turning in a lock, not a lock on a door, but the lock on a chain. The final chain that had bound the memory of a little boy to the pain of that alleyway fell away. The vow was not broken. It was fulfilled. The mission was not abandoned. It was completed. In that instant, the last ghost of Bruce Wayne was finally, utterly, and completely free. There was no more debt to pay, no more watch to keep. There was only the pure, unburdened essence of a soul that had given everything it had, and in doing so, had gained everything. The universe, in its perfect, self-sustaining balance, began to tell new stories. Stories of builders, of explorers, of creators. Stories where the central conflict was not against evil, but against the limits of understanding and the frontiers of love. The archetype of the warrior hero, the dark knight, receded into the foundational bedrock of myth. It was a fossil, beautiful and necessary, from a younger, more painful age. The children of this new age would learn of it as we learned of ancient epics, with reverence and with a grateful awareness that they lived in a time shaped by such struggles. And what remains? If one could listen to the space between the atoms, to the silence between the heartbeats of reality, one might hear it. Not a whisper of wings, not a symbol, not a story. A feeling, a simple, profound, and universal feeling of safety. It is the feeling a child has, sleeping in their bed, knowing they are loved. It is the feeling a traveler has, looking at the stars, knowing they are home. It is the final, lasting gift of the Batman. Not a hero to worship, but a certainty to inhabit. The certainty that, on the most fundamental level, all is well. The great tapestry was complete. Every thread of my life, the black of the cowl, the red of the blood in the alley, the silver of Alfred's hair, the green of Selina's eyes, the blue of the Kryptonian suit, was woven into a perfect, seamless whole. There was no more to add. The loom fell silent. The weaver could finally rest. The story had reached its natural, beautiful, and final conclusion. Any further words would not be a continuation, but a repetition. The echo had faded into the silence from which it came, and in that silence there is a park in a city that was once called Gotham. Children play where terror once ruled. The sun shines through leaves onto a plaque that simply reads, "For a watchful protector." No name is given. None is needed. An old man, whose great-grandfather was a cop named Gordon, sits on a bench and feels a sense of deep, inexplicable peace. He doesn't know why. He simply enjoys the sun on his face. The protection is now so seamless, so integrated, that it is invisible. It is simply the way the world is. The principle endures, but the name is forgotten. Batman is a word in a dead language, a subject for the most dedicated archaeologists of myth, but the function remains, as intrinsic as mathematics. It is the law of moral gravity that ensures kindness has more weight than cruelty. It is the unseen hand that ever so gently tilts the scales toward justice. It does not act, for it does not need to act. Its presence in the design of reality is enough. It is a fixed point, a north star for the soul of all that is. So this is the end of the story, not with a final battle, not with a last stand, but with a quiet morning in a universe that no longer needs its greatest guardian. The war is over, the peace is real, the hero is home. The love that began it all has become the law that sustains everything. There is nothing more to say.